The Dark Gods, Part 6. The Trail of Klingsor. The Trojan Horse Effect. The discovery of the Trojan Horse Effect, as detailed in Keel's UFOs, Operation Trojan Horse, was one of the great breakthroughs in ufology. It happened like this. NASA computer expert and astronomer Jacques Vallée and his fellow researchers Lucius Farish, Charles Flood, and Jerome Clark had heard a rumor of a flap, this being the term used for multiple sightings of UFOs, which had taken place in the USA during 1897. This led them to make a rigorous study of old newspaper files in the hope of gleaning more information. This was the story that they unearthed. Early in November 1896, a mysterious stranger with dark skin and dark eyes went through the preliminary motions of filing patents on a heavier-than-air flying machine. On the 13th of April, 1897, an exhibition organizer in Omaha received a letter from an inventor asking for space to display such a craft. A letter dated 9th of April was found in Wisconsin on the 14th of April, which purported to come from an airship called Pegasus, also mentioning patents. The next day, another letter was found in Grand Rapids, supposedly dropped from the airship. It stated altitude and that the crew were lost. On the next day, a package containing the remains of a meal was found in Chicago, with a card attached stating that it had been dropped from an airship called the Saratoga. Almost exactly at this time, an Arkansas judge named Byrne, who had read some of these reports, stumbled on the airship, temporarily grounded, with three Oriental-looking gentlemen aboard. A close-up sighting of the airship also took place over a town in Iowa in the same month. Also in April, farmhands in Springfield, Illinois, saw the craft, this time grounded for repairs. A similar report from Arkansas mentioned a bright light aboard. Brilliant lights are also mentioned in a report from Texas of a machine grounded in a cornfield. The crew told the witnesses that the invention was soon to be made public. It was not. The inventor's story gained new impetus. Back in Arkansas, a certain ex-Senator Harris gave it yet more fuel when he stated that he had encountered a craft taking on water, or so he was told, and that its captain and builder had used plans drawn up by an inventor uncle who had discovered anti-gravity. Later, in the same state, and yet another field, the airship reappeared. Communications were, of course, sketchy in those days as compared to now. It is probable that most people observing moving lights in the sky had heard merely the basic story, which included details of the searchlights associated with the craft. There was a ready-made explanation for what they observed. There was really no mystery, or so they thought. What they didn't realize was that the airship and the lights were seen in a great number of places at more or less the same time. No heavier-than-air flying machines were officially known in the USA until a year or two later. The researches were continued into later years. By September 1909, the phenomenon had seemingly changed. A winged craft was observed over Sweden. Only biplanes flew in those days, and not in that area. At around the same time, another inventor was making public a precociously advanced aeroplane. He seemed ordinary enough, but had some strange connections. In the same year, there were reports of lights and of aircraft with searchlights. In 1910, a mysterious biplane with lights was observed over New York, which was anachronistically maneuverable. In 1914, a landed aircraft was found in a field in South Africa. A cigar-shaped object with a searchlight was seen in the area many times during the summer. There were only a few clumsy biplanes in the whole of South Africa at that time. Dirigible balloons with searchlights can also be found in the records of the period, and later, strange helicopters. But it was mainly gray, unmarked planes that were seen, and these stayed around for many years. As late as 1968, one was seen over an airfield in Argentina, which disobeyed all the laws of aerodynamics. By that time, locals near Gallipoli, Ohio, had been seeing mysterious lights in the sky for 30 years, often as a variation, observing what they called cargo planes. These flew surprisingly low over hazardous territory on no known flight route. Also during that period, airplanes surrounded by red glows were reported. One, huge and delta-winged, appeared over Long Island in 1957. Delta wings were almost unheard of then. Mysterious aircraft, unmarked and dull gray, like all the others, seemed to appear in flap areas until at least the late 60s. Usually they flew at night, their cockpits brightly lit up. But it was the ghost flyers seen over Scandinavia in the 1930s that constituted the most classic case. These conformed to the usual description and were sought unsuccessfully by the Swedish Air Force. The pursuers could not match their immunity to unfavorable flying conditions, and two planes crashed. There were reports of craft flying low during snowstorms, projecting searchlights at the ground. As with the waves of 1896 to 17 and 1909, Keel tells us, the 1934 flap featured random low-level flights of recognizable objects and hundreds of flights of high-altitude lights carrying out seemingly intelligent maneuvers. About a decade after the heyday of Scandinavia's mysterious aircraft, technology took a leap into the atomic age. Imaginative writers, whose hold on the public's mind is by no means negligible, were increasingly featuring the concept of super technology, with its marvelous implication of spaceflight. By the end of the war, the world had heard much about rockets. Many must have mused on their obvious potential, freedom from earthly limits. Man's eyes were turning to the stars. It was at a key point in this period that a private pilot and businessman, Kenneth Arnold, noticed the disc-like objects flying near Mount Rainier, Washington. He described them as moving through the sky like saucers skipping over water. The news media took up the story, and the term flying saucer was born. With it came a wave of interest such as the world had never known. It was then that observers began to see craft other than the mystery aircraft. They began to describe super technological machines accompanied by unearthly little men. Some were actually green. In the 1950s, as we have described, men began to walk out of deserts with strange tales of rides on spaceships with long-haired Venusians. After Yuri Gagarin made the first manned flight into space, certain books which recounted their stories increased in sale. This was along with magazines crammed with reports of a more modest kind, yet still with an extraterrestrial emphasis. The phenomenon had changed again. Something became abundantly clear from researches into strange things seen in the sky from 1897 onwards. Let us recap. Airships were seen, sometimes landed, sometimes flying, and often with bright lights. The idea of a mystery inventor was implanted into the public consciousness. What is significant is that the airship and inventor idea was almost perfectly suited to the culture of the time. Many soft sightings merely of lights took place. Later, unidentified planes were seen, along with mystery dirigibles and helicopters. Reports of searchlights and other bright lights also recur. Once more, the hard sightings were tailor-made for the time. When man's imagination had been fired after the war, he was presented with Venusian scout ships and a host of other spacecraft. These all emitted brilliant light, and some again with searchlight-like beams. It is obvious that something was somehow manifesting frames of reference suited to each culture, providing an acceptable explanation for moving lights in the sky. It knew only too well that we prefer easy explanations. Or, as Keel puts it in relation to flying saucers, many seem to be nothing more than a disguise for some hidden phenomenon. They are like Trojan horses descending into our forests and farm fields, promising salvation and offering us the splendor of some great super civilization in the sky. But while statuesque, long-haired Venusians have been chatting benignly with isolated traveling salesmen and farm wives, a multitude of shimmering lights and metallic discs have been silently busying themselves in the forests of Canada, the outback country of Australia, and the swamps of Michigan. Our dragons and fairies would have, in part, been earlier forms of the same phantasmagorical system. The Trojan horse effect, then, is a ploy intended to divert us from the true significance of moving lights in the sky. We might think we know what they are, but we never do. Yet contained in the reports are aspects which seem to suggest that the phenomenon is working against itself, if it is trying to foster belief in various frames of reference. First, close-up sightings of UFOs and confrontations with entities almost invariably come from backwoods areas, and there is usually only one percipient at any time. These seem to fall, curiously, into two main categories. The first is that of the upstanding citizen, the judge or the ex-senator, whose words carry weight. The second, paradoxically, is the simple soul with no great social standing, who is not the sort of person to impress a more sophisticated intellect with his tales, added to which his stories are so incredibly stupid. He talks of spacemen with exotic pseudo-classical names. He describes little green men bounding playfully near flying saucers and stinking hairy creatures scampering into woods. The craft that he and his fellows report are rarely the same. There are long ones, squat ones, red ones, blue ones. Some are discs and some are rings, ellipsoid, trapezoid. They come in 1,000 different varieties. Then there are those men in black who put the frighteners on witnesses, warning them against reporting their sightings. There are also the bogus Air Force officers, another variety, who confiscate evidential material, much of which disappears anyway. And why so many fogged photographs? All these effects are commonplace. Then there are the amazing recantations, some contactees who have achieved a degree of credibility in that they appear to have had some real experience and certainly a connection with moving lights, announce suddenly and often nervously that it was all a hoax or that they were mistaken. How can we explain this? On the one hand, the phenomenon seems to require belief, yet on the other, it seems to inject inconsistencies and motifs worthy of derision. How can this paradox be resolved? The answer would appear to be that the belief manipulation is aimed at the public and the derision stimulus at officialdom, with its scientific disciplines, intellect, and sophistication. It is a two-tier effect. Let us analyze the function of the above. If information actually does arrive at official circles, unimpeded by the MIB, it is of such a nature that, to begin with at least, it is laughed out of court. Presumably the phenomenon knows that, if ever the reports are taken seriously, officialdom cannot release information concerning its inquiries without losing face. Governments simply cannot issue pronouncements on the supernatural and little green men. The phenomenon, then, seems to strike a careful balance between the believable and the absurd. It aims to fashion public belief according to its own purposes and make officialdom unwilling to step in. If ideas injected into our culture are one of its major concerns, it has hedged all its bets. A second common function to be found in the belief manipulation techniques relates to the messages that instigate the fantastically diverse cults, some of which we have studied. The function the messages share is obvious: the creation of schisms and disharmony among those with the same bent for spiritual research. Two motives have now become reasonably substantiated. They are trying to create confusion. They aim to divert us from the real meaning of their moving lights with dazzling displays of diverse phenomena. And there is another ploy, seemingly aimed at the belief structures of the imaginative, and oftentimes to win us to our harm. The instruments of darkness tell us truths, win us with honest trifles, to betrays in deepest consequence. In Shakespeare's play, the witches predicted two titles for Macbeth, Thane of Glamis and Thane of Cawdor. When both these predictions came true, Macbeth understandably began to take notice of the witches' words. They had made another prediction, that he would become king. His obsession with this led him to his doom. You might say that predictions very much interfered with the smooth running of his life. In the USA during May 1967, the entities predicted that a major power failure would take place. On the 5th of June, 4 states in the Northeast were blacked out. For many, this confirmed their abilities as prophets. They had already begun to predict that the Pope would be assassinated in Turkey. They also predicted that a massive power failure would follow, with New York falling into the sea on the 2nd of July. Plane crashes were also predicted. When it was announced that the Pope planned to visit Turkey in July, and 2 sets of planes flew into each other in 2 days, people became extremely edgy. Like Macbeth, they became obsessed with the major prediction, which of course, in this case did not take place. And it happened again. During the same year, as we have mentioned, Ashtar, along with his crony Orlin, thronged the psychic airwaves with predictions of a Holocaust on the 24th of December. Other minor predictions came true. That October, Keel was told that a disaster would occur on the Ohio River. He was also told that something would happen when President Johnson turned on the lights of the White House Christmas tree. On the 15th of December, it seems possibly just at the moment the lights were switched on, a bridge at Point Pleasant, West Virginia, spanning the Ohio River, gave way. Many motorists and passengers were catapulted to their doom. Shortly afterwards, the predicted death of the Australian Prime Minister and various predicted explosions took place. It is worthy of mention that UFOnauts have shown themselves able to cause blackouts and even plane crashes. 2 mysterious men were seen on the Ohio Bridge a few days before it gave way. A UFO was reported in the vicinity at the time of the catastrophe. So this was going to be it. The ominously omened 24th was just around the corner. An occasional Findhorn resident, Anthony Brooke, had been correlating all the predictions. A Danish psychic had built a bomb-proof shelter. Virtually the whole of the psychic world was in the grips of the Macbeth effect, obsession with predictions, leading to turmoil. In our case, there is also a tragic consequence, the kind of psychological state that occurs when one has placed all one's faith in a prediction, and in fact staked all one's credibility on its coming true. The new Mayans, those who allow themselves to be drawn into the ultra-terrestrial's Maya, or illusion, were in a bad way that Christmas. They tried to rally their spirits with passages from the Bible about the bridegroom being late, but it wasn't a good time for the spiritually minded folk of the world. Our ultra-terrestrials seem to like to see the spiritual world in turmoil and all its forces fragmented. It seems to be a main prerequisite of their actions. We have seen that the Trojan horse effect appears to be designed to stop us finding out the real nature of UFOs. It is a possibility that this creation of turmoil and fragmentation in the world of spiritual research also has this as its purpose. This is an interesting possibility, as it might be telling us exactly where to look, and there are probably other things they do not want us to know. From these and other pointers, we can now begin to speculate about the kind of mentality involved. On the 12th of December 1967, a young American mother saw a UFO flying above some power lines to the side of the road along which she was driving, keeping pace with her. Her son, who was with her, fell into a trance. The car pulled over to the shoulder of the road by itself and ran into a field where it stopped. A beam of light flashed down from the object, she was later to relate, and I heard a humming sound. She then began to hear discarnate voices, which informed her that a friend of hers was having a terrible accident. This, she later found, was true. UT seemed to want to impress us with their omniscience. They usually do this in a rather grim context, as the dire predictions also show. The above report is fairly typical of activities stemming from this motive. There have been numerous others. They also seem to want to impress us with their various other abilities, most of which we have touched on. This, of course, is closely allied to the previous motive. The woman became hysterical. The predictions caused panic. But quite the most obvious giveaways regarding this desire are the terrible forms our beings sometimes adopt, and the terrible motifs in some of the hallucinations they obviously inject. Bug-eyed monsters and horrible, leathery winged creatures are somehow too horrible. The same very much applies to Shaver's Darrow. Something is obviously pulling out all the stops merely for effect and overdoing it. Predictions have been seen to have the power to manipulate thousands. This seems to be one of their functions. It is as if something likes to have us dancing to its tune. Contactees and mediums are thrown into all sorts of bogus causes, sometimes spanning a lifetime. We have looked at the phenomenon's hypnotic powers. It seems that the first thing it does to its victims is fix them with its hypnotic stare, backed up by its mysterious flashes. It then controls what the victim thinks he sees, and even what he thinks. Godlike beings appear in practically all the contactee reports, imparting the secrets of the universe and firing the percipient with awe. UT seem to have awakened these emotions even more strongly when they came out of the sky and demonstrated their powers and knowledge to primitives. Religious visions take on the form of certain stock figures. The devil, and even the little fairies to whom peasants were known to pray, also have this in common. They want to be worshipped. The first thing to say here is that the word technicalities will be taken by many as something of a misnomer, for there is practically no orthodox science in the following. Science, unfortunately, has not evolved sufficiently to provide an accurate terminology. Accordingly, a curious dichotomy will no doubt arise between those who feel that I have presented explanations and those who feel I have not. It is evident that science of a non-materialist variety will eventually be integrated into orthodox disciplines, but at the moment we are experiencing a transitional phase. A number of researchers who were ostracized by their fellows will probably soon gain posthumous recognition. In fact, a major tribute has perhaps been paid to them by the filmmaker George Lucas. Names that come immediately to mind are Franz Anton Mesmer, Karl von Reichenbach, the Marquis de Puysegur, and Wilhelm Reich. There are many others. I find myself, as others before me, in the position of seeking to vindicate these men. This is in the same way as those of our forebears who have been stigmatized as superstitious dolts by the same rational folk who accept UFO phenomena and yet unfortunately give no credence to the forms these took in the past. Franz Anton Mesmer was born in Austria in about 1734. After graduating in medicine, he turned his attention away from orthodox science to magnets and the healing powers which he found emanated from them. This curative influence he termed animal magnetism. It appeared to be concentrated not only in magnets, but also in the nervous system of animals. Healing, he assumed, took place through increasing the charge of this force in the patient, the depletion of which characterized various ailments. The energy could come not only from metals, but also from healthy or highly charged subjects who could transfer it through touch. This is analogous to the laying on of hands. Not only was healing recorded, subjects also noticed during the touch of magnet or hand prickling sensations. Another phenomenon which interested mesmerists was the glow that sensitive people could see emanating from magnets, magnetists, and magnetized people or objects. In the 1840s, a distinguished chemist, Baron Karl von Reichenbach, came into the picture. He reported that sensitives, having been subjected to darkness, could see lights emanating not only from magnets and bodies, but also from metals and crystals. He posited the existence of a fluid that he called odal, which polarized itself around conductors. This polarization resulted in sensations of heat and cold. One of Mesmer's pupils was the Marquis de Puysegur, who was born in 1751. He also attested to the healing effects of animal magnetism. He proposed that this could be directed by will. His most significant finding was that his subjects, when touched by hand or magnet, would often fall into a trance-like state in which they were susceptible to commands. Such discoveries came to the notice of a Manchester surgeon called James Braid. From the Greek word for sleep, he coined a word for this effect. He called it hypnotism, healing, prickling sensations, crystals, and temperature effects. All of these we have previously seen to be hallmarks of the entities we have been studying. There was an association of an energy-producing light effects with hypnotism. Might these light effects not be related to our brilliant flashes? If a hypnotist was asked to convince his subject that he had just been on a trip aboard a flying saucer to a super-technological Venus, he would find it no difficult task. The control experienced by contactees, etc., is a classic hallmark of hypnotism. Is Mesmer's magnetic fluid, or Reichenbach's odal, the same energy as that of the brilliant flashes? Now, in 1808, a Dr. Jungstilling published his belief that animal magnetism could cause an effect that we have also met before, that of astral dislocation or out-of-body experience. Early mesmerists reported other crucial effects. Some subjects found that a kind of psychic vision was opened up in the same way as our contactees. They reported visionary experiences of other worlds and communication with inhabitants. A rediscoverer of the same energy was Wilhelm Reich, a man who, like all the others, has been stigmatized as a classic pseudoscientist. Reich learned how to accumulate what he called organ energy. Subjects who stayed too long in his accumulators reported effects identical to those known to be caused by ultraviolet radiation. We have also seen this in earlier pages. Reich was an interested observer of the whole UFO phenomenon. In his classic Earth Mysteries book, The View Over Atlantis, John Michel linked organ energy with ley lines. He suggested that hollowed barrows were directly comparable to Reich's accumulators, layers of earth and stone corresponding to layers of organic and inorganic material. He proposed that leys were straight-line flows of the same energy. Vast numbers of quartz-bearing megaliths can be found positioned on them, apparently used as amplifiers. This throws light on our special objects, which frequently contain this potent material. The student of the occult has an advantage over the medical man when it comes to an ability to explain hypnotism. A moment's thought comes up with the mechanics, though, as I say, the terminology might not be acceptable. We are held to have a column of energy more or less coexistent with the spine. This has for centuries been called the Kundalini. An occultist acquainted with the work of Mesmer would no doubt feel that he had discovered an identical energy. The Kundalini rises according to the amount of biological energy it contains, which is normally increased through initiation. As it rises, it passes through centers known as chakras, which have correspondences in the physical body. Each chakra passed through is held to become charged or opened. When this occurs in some of the higher chakras, another layer of reality is held to open up to the consciousness. The psychic centers become open. Thus, the energy, seen as light effects by mesmerists, etc., can actually open up the recipient. The effects of this opening are manifold. Psychic vision can enable him to see an extra-dimensional world and its beings. Clairaudience enables him to hear discarnate voices. The chakra responsible for visual psychism, would also be open to commands from an outside source, hence suggestibility. It seems that these can come not only from earthbound hypnotists, but also from beings that exist at a higher vibration. The light energy itself acts as a kind of medium for suggestion and also thoughts, hence telepathy, rather like a cosmic telephone wire. It seems that the Kundalini system can be somewhat bypassed. The magnetic fluid, which emanates in strength from various materials, can act directly on the psychic centers. Our beings tend to give the percipients such things as pieces of quartz for this reason. We have already seen crystals emanating odal. These are presumably aids not only to communication, but also to control. Quartz also opens up more general psychic faculties, hence the widespread use of the crystal. The pyramid or cone shape tends also to focus this kind of energy, as recent Kirlian photographs attest. The communicator asked for a paper cone to be made in the spiritualism/MIB case. I personally experienced the forces concerned when I found my heart chakra opening when a cardboard pyramid was in the room, which incidentally was on a ley line. When I was looking for some background material for this section in Man, Myth, and Magic, I was pleasantly surprised to find the following. Kundalini. Among the many phenomena accompanying the activated Kundalini are strange auditory experiences. The sounds are not externally heard. Their sequence begins with a high shrill. If all goes well, the shrill sound begins to change. It is lowered in pitch and becomes like the buzzing of a bee. It seems that Shermer and countless other UFO percipients, who often used exactly the same phrase, were giving us yet another important clue. The area of existence from which our fluid is held to emanate is called the astral plane. Astral light being another common term for the force. The astral is traditionally the next plane up from the physical. We are said to have an astral body, which, as we have noted, can become detached from its physical counterpart. Jung Stilling, as we have seen, connected this with magnetic fluid. One of the properties of the astral plane is that it exists in another time continuum. If our percipients enter into this plane, this would explain the time distortions. If the entities live on this plane, genuine prophecies might also be explained. Entrance into the astral, the plane of illusion, as it is often called, is another explanation for the visionary trips. Slight dislocation of the astral body is said to cause headaches. The astral is thought to be influenced by the imagination and work directly on the physical plane. A magician, as opposed to conjurer, is reputed to be able to create something on the astral plane with his imagination. He can make it become physical through what could be called the flow of manifestation. This would account for the shape-shifting abilities of our entities. It would also explain their ability to materialize and dematerialize objects. Trance control or possession is the astral body of another being entering the physical body of the medium. The occultist Dion Fortune tells us that eating and drinking with people creates what is known as a psychic link. This makes the guest more amenable to the desires of the host. This is the principle behind the business lunch and the uses to which hospitality is put in the East. It would account for our food factor. Keel also postulates the use of drugs. The MIB sometimes hand over a strange cigarette, for example. The special day factor is also probably explicable in magical terms. Kabbalism, that basis of Western magic, subdivides the universe into basic forces. Some of these are represented by the planets. The days of the week are named after 7 of these. Wednesday comes under Mercury, suggesting improved circumstances for communication. Saturday comes under Saturn, which is sometimes associated with disintegrative force. What I call ufological science simply involves scientific findings which throw light on the UFO phenomenon. John A. Keel has busied himself researching into these and mentions some in his The Eighth Tower, which his English publishers entitled The Cosmic Question. These findings can probably be integrated to some extent into the pseudoscientific ones. Very low-frequency radio waves and microwaves can cure nervous disorders, arthritis, etc. They can promote rapid healing of broken bones. Soviet scientists discovered that certain VLF waves can also create headaches, toothaches, etc., could be caused by high-frequency sound. High-frequency sound could also be responsible for the panic sometimes caused. Typical microwave effects have been noticed in internal cooking of grass, that is, roots, not leaves, where a UFO was sighted. Radar waves can result in humming noises. External buzzing accompanying sightings might also be an electrical effect. Wailing noises such as those of the banshee or woman fairy could be caused by an outrush or inrush of air created by a temporary materialization. Dead animals are sometimes found at UFO sighting points exhibiting marks of concussion. This could be expected if an air pressure event is the case. The entities appear to leave a residue of silicon carbide when they dematerialize. This often happens as they are struck by a light from a UFO. Astrologers can seemingly predict magnetic storms. These storms can cause blackouts unless cables are shielded. VLF waves and gamma radiation also disperse electrical energy. The car stalling effect during sightings is well known. Waves of a certain frequency can charge air with ozone and nitrogen dioxide. Hydrogen from water, one of our factors, can combine with carbon to produce methane, CH4. No examination of the technicalities of UFO-related phenomena would be complete without a look at this linking phenomenon. Ivan T. Sanderson was a one-time radio and television zoologist who founded the Society for the Investigation of the Unexplained. In his book Invisible Residents, he described findings which were to provide a major key to the study of strange happenings. Sanderson and his assistants had accumulated a vast amount of data on Bermuda Triangle-type phenomena, including UFOs. One day they began to chart points of major activity on a world map. What they found was that certain patterns were evident, except for a couple of exceptions where data were scarce. Major points of appearance phenomena were geometrically related to each other. They were on the same latitude north and south of the equator, and also equidistant. Points below deviate to the east. Captain Bruce Cathy is a New Zealand pilot. Having noticed a mysterious landed craft, he also went on to study run-of-the-mill UFO sightings from a cartographical point of view. What he discovered was that he could draw a rectangular grid onto which sighting points would usually fall. Eventually, he discovered a distinct mathematical relationship between these. This relationship included a mysterious aerial sighted on the southern ocean bed. It also included places where explosions, both unexplained and nuclear, took place, and numerous secret establishments. His findings have been put to the test through a computer study. They have been found, on the whole, to work. Some have sought to convince themselves that the aerial was a coral growth. What is interesting about these findings is that Cathy has been able to bring the factor of time into his calculations with such success that he has been able to predict certain phenomena. This includes the timing and placing of nuclear tests. It would seem that we have some peculiar interface between third and fourth dimensional physics related to the shape of the sphere, our planet. This interface impinges itself at certain places on its surface. Dion Fortune has been criticized for her tendency to reveal occult secrets in her books. In Spiritualism in the Light of Occult Science, after a passage on ectoplasm, she writes, "As good materializing mediums are rare, occultists are accustomed to use other substances than human ectoplasm for the purpose of enabling entities to materialize. The emanations of freshly shed blood serve equally well. It was for this reason that blood sacrifices were employed in certain cults. We seem to have yet another technicality here. This accounts for the phenomenon's interest in blood. There is even a recorded case of a UFO trying to hoist up a bloodmobile on its way to a hospital. When the God of the Old Testament and demons communicating with medieval magicians demanded blood sacrifices, it was probably, in all cases, so that they could take on flesh. This would allow them to have some direct sway over the physical plane. When blood-drained animals are found during UFO flaps, and mysterious spacemen and men in black appear, both answering to the same description, we no doubt have the same principle in operation. Please stay tuned for the next part of this book. Thank you to our beloved channel members for your continuous support. Your support is what keeps this profound knowledge flowing to the nation. Peace, blessings, much love and enlightenment to you all. Shalom. On Earth, there was once a people who held the knowledge of the universe across space and time. They were the Israelites. Over time, their wisdom was scattered among all nations, with each taking a piece. In the end, this left them destitute. Now, listen to this profound wisdom passed down through great works, presented in your voice, from your own perspective, from the perspective of the Israelites themselves. For early access to chapters and full audiobooks, consider becoming a member. For just $10 per month, you can unlock exclusive access to this priceless wisdom, once stolen from our ancestors. Hear their voices through your own as you join us on this journey of discovery and reclamation.